investors certainly view spine as like almost like this like rarefied air that is inherently more either difficult or risky or whatever.
Hey, we both have to win in this, and let's be honest, we both have to make money, and there's no need to hide behind that or anything else. Just be transparent about it.
It's not transactional. It has to be a partnership. It has to be based around relationship and trust.
Focusing on the relationship primarily and not just the transaction helps in all of that.
We do this. The other stuff claims to do this. We just do it better.
Any of our potential customers or current customers, it is about how do we help you be successful in this? Because if we can help you be successful, ultimately we'll be successful.
People think you do these transactions and they cut you a big check and you walk away and just like wave at them as they have success.
It is all about de-risking along the way.
Almost a certainty that your initial thing and the Gen 1 version of that initial thing is not what's going to make you the most successful. It's not what's going to get acquired. It's Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Medtech Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, founder at Exo Medtech. We have got a beauty of an episode today. This one was really special because we got to talk to Brian More, CEO at NanoV. They just completed an acquisition transaction with Medtronic, sold off some of their technology assets. They do pretty groundbreaking nanotechnology, nanotube technology for surface treating orthopedic and spine implants and some other things. So we get into that transaction with Medtronic, what made it happen, what the courtship was like, their story pulling levers, including licensing technology from university, grant funding, using investment bankers. We talk through, what they did right, what they did wrong, what keeps Brian up at night. It was just an incredible episode, walking through a lot of the different parts of being an operator at a medtech company. And he truly has kind of like done it all from the OEM and manufacturing side to leading a company and going through some like pretty unique FDA hurdles in some ways. So I know you're going to love this episode. For anybody that's a medtech operator, thinks that they want to sell, some of their technology to one of the big someday, this is a can't miss episode. So I know you're going to love it. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Brian, welcome to the pod. Happy to have you here. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from my office today in Northeast Indiana, just outside of Fort Wayne.
That's awesome. Fort Wayne, if you know anything about orthopedics, Fort Wayne's kind of a powerhouse for it. And I've heard some like awesome stuff about Indiana recently, some like economic development initiatives and activity around medtech and biotech. And maybe we can get into that later. But yeah, thank you for joining. We're going to get into all the details, all the nitty gritty, but just kind of, off the top, just to start, tell us what NanoV does and kind of how the company was started, the whole kind of story of, how it came to be.
Yeah, well, Spencer, with any business startup, you kind of weave your way through to find what works, and you learn a lot of things that don't work. And NanoV is no different than that. Started with some very raw IP we licensed from Purdue. Actually goes back to Brown and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. The inventing scientist was Dr. Webster, but we brought that in back in 06, 07 and kind of weaved our way through how we were going to commercialize this technology, which ultimately led to a couple spine products with the technology on it, attracted the attention of some large OEMs. And over the last few years, NanoV has really changed the strategy to be really focused on, we believe that there is a difference can be made on implant performance solely based on surface characteristics. Mm-hmm. So if I look at the mission today, it's all about being the leading developer and producer of surface technologies to improve healing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So tell me, where did the company name come from? And I know nano, it's nanotechnology, but like NanoV, I've dealt with company names and trademark BS in the past, but like it's an interesting name. I'd love to hear how that name came to be.
Funny you asked that, because I had to do some research in the last 6 months to actually answer that question for myself. And I've been around NanoV since the beginning. I helped incubate it with the founder and different things. And I had somebody a while back really challenge me on it. It's like, you guys, when you say the name right, it's like Nanovis and you say NanoV. What's it even mean? And I didn't have an answer that day. So I set out on a mission to, well, what is the answer? I went back to the tech transfer guy at Purdue and tried to figure out where did this name come from, because they had it branded before we licensed it out of Purdue. So it can be pronounced V or Vis, relates to power or force. And nano is small. So the whole idea is the power of small bonds. So the nanostructures create a bond that cells want to attach to, and the name comes back to it's the power of small bonds. The interesting thing is yes, it talks about the technology, but as I learned that and discussed it with some board members, numbers, I also realize it also talks about who we are, because we love the power of relationships and the force that can come with those small bonds that also happen in relationships. So it ended up being great name. Yes, we still get feedback that we don't say it right, but we can say it however we want, right?
Yeah.
And we chose to be Nanovi.
I share that frustration. First company I founded in the vascular access space was Linneus Medical, and it's spelled like Lineus, right? And so I can't tell you the number of times people still to this day be like, oh, Linus Medical, right? It's like, not Linus, it's Linneus. I feel your pain on that. I'm sure you have to do that all the time too. And so just maybe word for the wise to people out there, when you're naming your company name, it should be 5 or 6 letters is great, but make sure it's easy to pronounce if that matters to you, right?
Yeah, be ready for the phonetic correct way to say it, right?
That's right. So, I work in the spine space, TLIF implant space. So I'm pretty tuned to this, but for the people that aren't spine people or aren't in this kind of bony ingrowth world, there's a lot of research. You guys are at the forefront of this, right? On ingrowth versus on growth and porosity versus micro roughness, and is it 3 nanometers and 30 or 300, and all of those things play into the osseointegration, how bone grows on it, grows in it, attaches to it. So tell me how, maybe kind of break down how you guys think about it. What do you think the conventional wisdom was or is, and how you guys are doing things a bit differently?
I mean, as we've been in the market, start talking about nano, and if it's on a micron porous surface, they think the micron porous surface is our nano, and it's like, no, our nano's sitting on top of that. And it's part of the reason why we went down the path of a micron porous interbody with a nano on it, because we do believe it's both and. So micron porous, as you said, is going to increase terminal or this physical fixation, right? It's going to be harder to pull out once it's in there for 3 months than it was to put in. The nano surface really is about doing those things quicker, faster, better. So the nano is bone on growth, which really doesn't change the terminal fixation. So if you had a perfect world implant, even I'm thinking a smooth titanium implant, perfect world that integrated well with the body, it's going to have a terminal fixation strength. And our nano will help get to that terminal fixation strength, just gets there faster. Yeah. Now, do we generally increase the terminal fixation strength of a pedicle screw? Yes. All of our models show that in micromotion, infection-induced models, we still achieve a positive fixation on those implants. It's not going to increase the fixation past the point of screw failure or things like that. And we've had to prove that because doctors get worried about that. You start talking about, well, we're going to increase the fixation strength to your screw. And the first thing they say is, well, what if I have to revise? Can I get it out? And we've had to do all the work, show them, oh yeah, you can still get it out. Tell people this all the time. We're not going to change how well a 3D printed interbody or 3D printed device is going to fixate. We're just going to help you do it more efficiently, effectively, and faster.
As always, that was a great breakdown, by the way. So as I always like to say, so what? So why? Why does this matter? Right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of failure rates, failure modes, right, for spine surgery and fusion. So I know that you guys have some 4 pillars, and I do want to ask about that in a second, but what's the biggest impact that you guys see? Is it pseudoarthrosis? Is it kind of the, lowered infection risk? If you were to say, I know there's other things, but what's the primary thing that you guys think is you have our technology surface treated on your implant, it's going to give you blank?
Yeah, I think in the end, if I had to choose one thing, it's going to give you better fixation.
Yeah.
So, and we've got, and they're anecdotal stories, and we've tried to publish some of those, but we've got, some of the early surgeon adopters, they're like, hey, I'll use it, but I'm only going to use it in all my hard cases. So I'm going to use it in my 3 and 4 level cervical fusions, which we know at cervical fusion, the number of levels you do, the risk of pseudoarthrosis goes up, right? The risk of failure goes up. Surgeons had no problems with those tougher cases. We've had surgeons, hey, I'm going to use a nano-treated pedicle screw and fenestrated cemented screw, because if it works, then I'm in a better spot long-term with the patient.
Yeah.
When you use a fenestrated cemented screw, it's a nuclear option, right? And there's no going back from that. And those guys have gotten along very well. We've had guys use our nano screws in lieu of HA screws because of the complications that come with HA. They get along great. Surgeons who use he only uses our nano antibodies when he has patients with discitis, no complications. So I think comes back to just performs better. You see a better patient.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So don't want to bury the lead here because I know a lot of people that are tuning into this want to hear about this. So the Medtronic deal, Medtronic acquired some of Nanov's nanosurface technology assets in February. So, 2 months ago. Congrats, by the way. We're going to dig into this a little bit more. But I'm really curious how this deal came to fruition. Was it always the goal to sell a portion of the technology assets, or was there some utilization or licensing with them specifically, right, that was kind of a precursor to this transaction? I'm always curious how these things came to bear.
Yeah, I think, the original original business model was, hey, get it commercialized, reduce all the risk, right? Prove the regulatory pathway, prove operational scale, prove that the market wants it, do all those things, and then look for OEM partners. Nanobe never intended to be a high growth products company. We're a science team that drives innovation, and how do we get innovation in the market? And for OEMs who want to have that innovation, you have to de-risk it for them. So we did that. We did that over a period of 7 years on our spinal interbodies and pedicle screws. And that did catch the attention of some Medtronic surgeons and Medtronic distributors who's like, hey, this is great stuff. It really enhanced our product line. And that kind of opened the door to Medtronic. And I look back over all of that, and all I can say is God's good. God's been good to Nanobe. And that opened the door to Medtronic and a really development relationship in the beginning on taking our technology, two pieces, the micron porous titanium scaffold molded into PEEK. That was one technology. And nanosurface on titanium interbodies is the second technology, which would include the Forticore style interbody that Nanobe had in the market. And we set out on doing a development agreement with Medtronic to basically help them get that product commercialized. And that's what really came to fruition then that you read about in February was the culmination of it all working, right? We got it all done. We got it commercialized. We reduced it to practice specifically for them. And their purchase was really those two pieces of technology and spinal interbodies. Yeah. So Nanobe has full control over other pieces of spine, whether that's screws or DBRs or different things like that. We have some new devices coming out, whether that's disc replacement devices, which would have a great application, or maybe the set fusion. I mean, there's all sorts of other things, right? New techniques and stuff coming out that would be applicable. In any place you have micromotion, the technology is going to do great.
Yeah.
And we've been cushioned for other segments as well. I know you'll probably get into that later, but it's back to these things take time, and Medtronic's no different. It took time. It took a lot of time, a lot of discussions and a lot of patience. I don't know how many times we had discussions about patience and do we set deadlines and we do these things. But at the end of the day, I remind our team all the time, we did a development deal and acquisition on one asset with the largest spine company in the world. Yeah. And our vision, and even if I go back to the founder and the initial CEO who was here for a long time, who did a ton of good on getting a technology commercialized and reduced to practice, our vision was always we wanted to see the technology expanded as broad and as wide as possible. Who else did that better in spine than Medtronic? So it was a fulfillment of vision.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, congrats again. I think there's a really good story and almost case study here for your biomedical engineers, right? Or, people that are kind of more in the lab from like a university setting, right? Because you said this was originally out of Purdue, right? Licensed technology out of Purdue. So I think a lot of people not be able to make that kind of strategic pivot that you guys did and say, hey, we may not actually want to ever be a product company, right? We want to be a technology company. And I think you've probably seen it too. And I've seen, if you've worked with university researchers and stuff, you'll see these technologies that are incredible, but it would be, are they capable, this team, or is this technology capable of like kind of going in and competing in the market with all of these other products? Or would it make an existing, is it more valuable? Is it a better path for an existing large, group or other people to integrate it? So I think like that, to me, there's a big story there and kind of a shining light of hope, right? For people that are developing things that are more technology based, that maybe they don't want to turn it into a full product company, but there's still a pathway and there's still pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if you kind of stay disciplined, stay focused, and then de-risk it, right, for those partners. And that's what I want to ask you about next. So you mentioned de-risking the technology for OEMs, for other people that wanted to integrate this with their technologies. When you say that, what does that really mean? Is that just getting an FDA master file? Is it just exhaustive verification and validation work to prove that it performs how it does, or it's as rigorous as it needs to be? Or kind of what do you mean by that de-risking?
Yeah, personally, I think you've got to hit all the levers on the risk side. So when you think through, okay, what is the risk of a new technology or new product? Well, you have design risk, technical risk, you have execution risk, you got regulatory risk, which may fall into either one of those. You've got, well, does the market even need it?
Yeah.
So many times you talk about, academic institutions and stuff. So many times academic researchers, they're finding solutions without a problem. And sometimes you find a problem, sometimes you don't. It costs a lot more money if you find a solution than looking for a problem than if I know the problem and I want to find a solution. That's always been interesting. But in pricing's another one. In COGS, so many of these products are COGS sensitive.
Yeah.
Is pricing going to be better? And all those things, you really have to have answers for all of them. And the one thing that we didn't do that we did learn our lesson on, and looking back, we could have done something that would have told our story better. And that was data. We never did a great job of collecting data on usage and patient outcomes. And it's hard. I mean, you're not taking these on devices out. So how do you measure it and those things? But I look at other white papers that others have done, including Medtronic. I'm like, that would have been really easy data to collect.
Yeah.
Return to work days, pain scores, opioid usage, all those things that are indications of better and quicker healing, we could have done, and it could have told a better story. So as we develop new surfaces and new technologies, the team knows that, hey, clinical data has to be part of the plan.
Yeah.
Publication has to be part of the plan. And we're just, we work through those things. So you learn those lessons and you can actually move on. But I do think it's all of it. And, because Nanovi did start down a path of having the things in place to be able to do a product, put a product in the field, does put us ahead of the game when it comes to surface and innovation development. We plan on maintaining our spec developer capabilities for that very reason, because we control the whole show. I control data, I control clearances, I control the label, and all those things then make it very easy for another OEM to come in and say, okay, I see the pathway. We're just going to replicate that for us. So
I think that's a really good point, is like you guys going forward and actually getting the product on the market beyond just having like a technology focused master file is like another layer of de-risking. That's like, I got to imagine was super valuable.
Yeah. And if I have a master file, I don't have the ability to put my own product in the market to reference that master file. I don't get to establish master file until the first 510K goes in.
Yeah.
So if I can't do that 510K on my own, I have to find a partner willing to take risk with me, which is hard.
It's very hard.
So that's
and there's risk. And there's risk on your side, right? Because like if that partner doesn't do something right, like it's kind of like baby with the bathwater situation. You know what I mean?
How do they market it? And we spent time with Medtronic. As we were going through that, we showed them, hey, here are the hot buttons we hit when we're marketing this technology. You're going to want to adopt.
Yeah. So I was literally, I don't know, I didn't share these notes with you, but that was my next question on marketing and like market positioning. So you position Nanovi as addressing the 4 pillars of healing: bacterial colonization, inflammatory response, vascularization, and osseointegration. I'm really curious I know I mentioned this a little bit, but like the validation testing, kind of the verification testing to prove the performance, because those are all kind of very unique things. Was it one full battery of kind of biocom and all of these different batteries, or was there very specific bespoke tests that you guys had to do to prove performance across those 4 pillars?
Yeah. So it all started with the osseointegration. That was all we were focused on. Was the osseointegration piece, because there was a need for that in spine. There have not been aerial advances in spine for 2 decades. I mean, there's just been a lot. The market was prime there. So osseointegration was the first pillar that we really hit. And then as other surfaces were coming around, a lot of talk around bacterial and antimicrobial and those things, and we did some separate testing on that to show how do we perform in those things. The middle 2, the vascularization and the inflammatory response, that actually was leveraging other data on nanotube surfaces. The research on nanotubes goes back probably 20 years, 15 to 20 years easily. A lot of research has gone into that, both in the United States, outside the United States. There's just a lot of literature around nanostructures, aesthetically controlled and dimensions nanostructures. So we leverage data on those things, and we continue to think through, as we do new surfaces that may not have third-party data out there for those things, what will we do to prove those points? And we'll have to work through that. But that's also then led to, okay, we continue to conduct animal studies that continue to bolster those pillars, but maybe in different segments. So we're wrapping up an animal study right now that is going to very good for soft tissue attachment, which is going to have dental implications. And it feeds into the things we talk about, those pillars, but it's a study that was designed to really continue to check the boxes in those pillars.
That's awesome. So kind of like continuing on with this, the performance metrics that we talked about with the surface treatment, all of those things and getting into the weeds on those is like pretty nuanced, like a pretty technical sale. And I know you mentioned, like you talked to Medtronic about here's the points to hit. So like surgeons are busy, everybody's resistant to change. Sometimes it's hard to get a surgeon or a VAC committee to really engage the intellect and get into the weeds with the technicalities of a product and why it's going to drive better outcomes. So what is kind of the marketing and messaging strategy that you guys recommend that you've seen success when marketing this technology?
Yeah, for us, because we've got a really strong label in our IFU, we've got comparative data in our label. So we compare our nanosurface to dual acid etch to a thin layer of calcium phosphate to machine titanium. And we show increased mineralization, both of mesenchymal stem cells and osteoblasts, two separate data sets that's significantly superior to those other surfaces. So when you sit down in front of a surgeon, you just start with the label. Hey, doc, here's our label. Yes, we have a nano designation, which says that we do the surface in itself does these things. And then here's the data. It's in the label. There's no risk of off-label promotion because it's in the label.
Yeah.
And then we actually went back. I mean, after we got our nano designation, we actually went back to the FDA with another submission to get the data added into the label.
Yeah.
And that really becomes a differentiator for us and how you market. You just start there. And the doctors, they read between the lines. They know exactly what that means. And you start talking about some of this other stuff. They just know their patient's going to heal better. And that usually is all it takes. If we lay it out with, what they're using now, it's really a no-brainer.
Yeah. So just making it, so what I'm taking out of that is just making it very clear cut data and like having it on the label saying, here's the other stuff. We do this. The other stuff claims to do this. We just do it better. And it's very clear. And like start with that. And then, yeah, that's great. I think it was one of your like LinkedIn posts, but like you recently mentioned, that like orthopedic companies are only now beginning to explore like really innovative ways to make devices perform better as the markets mature. So do you, are you of the mind that, these large orthopedic companies are just pretty bad at innovating, or is there something that you think is more structural about the industry that has slowed progress?
My opinion, if you look at the big segments, so primary joint replacement, hips and knees, it comes to fixation, so many of those devices are cemented, but they got pretty good outcomes when it comes to fixation. I mean, it's pretty hard to make an incremental improvement there when it comes to a fixation standpoint. Now, with the introduction of cementless market in those areas, that's going to open up the door, I believe, for surface technology. It's going to put more pressure on the implant to get that thing fixated faster. I don't have cement that's done in, a day or 2 hours or whatever. I think in that segment, it becomes the infection piece it's like the big deal.
Yeah.
And I think to be successful with the surface in those areas, you're going to have to be able to claim something on the infection side, which we may or may not have programs in place to work on that. But I think any jump to other areas where performance may not be good. So you look at some foot and ankle procedures where it's just hard to heal. It could be from a compromised patient, whether it's diabetes or inflammatory disorders, or even drugs that cause inflammatory disorders. All those things cause that patient not to heal well. Could be that vascularization isn't good in some bones in the foot. Those are the areas that we're starting to get a lot of interest in. Okay, I need to throw everything I've got at this procedure, including the surface of the implant. And I think we'll do well there because of that. And the other thing is, our surface it's permanent. So primary surface is not going to resorb over a period of time. I get micromotion on day 30 or day 330. The surface is indicating for the same response. So, but I think that's where when you get out, I don't know if when it comes to a fixation technology, I don't know if they've done bad. I mean, that's where 3D printing is going in those other force materials, whether it's Fights Medical or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of advancements in those areas as cementless comes on and move to ASCs, all those things in the primary joint space. I think it is going to open up the door for something else to improve the implant performance.
No, I'm with you. I think I have like a little bit of a different take, and I know you probably have yours is probably more informed, but I did an analysis. I was looking at spine implant patents, and I looked at Globus NuVasive, and I looked at Medtronic, and I looked at Stryker, and this was actually right before, or right around the time, I think it was right after actually Stryker sold off their, interbody business. But I was like shocked to see the age of the patent portfolio, kind of the average age, the number of just expired patents, the number that had been filed in the past, 6 to 8 years. It was like almost nothing. I mean, Globus and NuVasive had by far the youngest patent portfolio. Stryker's was super old. And it was kind of crazy to me that, and I guess there for a while, they were leveraging acquisition, right, as kind of their big innovation push, excluding present company, with M&A not being as high recently. I'm kind of like, where do we go from here, right? Like, are they going to just upstart innovating again, or are we going to have to see an uptick in M&A to bring anything truly innovative to the market? Because I fundamentally don't think that they've prioritized it. It doesn't seem to me that they've prioritized it. And this may be specific, right, just to some certain segments and where they're blowing it out of the water innovation-wise on some other segments. But I think specifically kind of in that spine space, it seems like that's the case to me. And then it seems like kind of in the implant world, people are on a defeatingly narrow set of kind of differentiation, right? I don't know if you would love to hear your thoughts on that?
Hammer toe devices on the market or something like that, and actually compete for a very small segment because most of the hammer toe market, I believe, is done with the K-wire. So it's tough. Those are tough environments. We do believe a surface technology used appropriately can differentiate it can be differentiator, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing that with a few opportunities.
Yeah.
I was in 25 years of contract manufacturing and med device before this, kind of across the gamut. And it's still true today. The spine world is kind of operate independent of everything else.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. I mean, it's been a challenge moving our tech from spine to other areas of orthopedics. And part of that is two separate markets.
It's so true. And like something that I've also seen kind of on the fundraising side, investors certainly view it as this like spine as like almost like this like rarefied air that is inherently more either difficult or risky or whatever. And it's like perplexing to me that, you look at like minimally invasive surgery or even like kind of close cousin, hip and knee orthopedic stuff, sports med, and it's not viewed the same at all. And spine has just kind of got this like, I don't even want to call it lore because it's not really positive. You know what I mean? Like they're just a little bit gun shy on it, like especially angels and angel groups, and they feel like it's harder to do diligence on. I don't know. I've had that experience as well, though.
Yeah, part of that could be, there's been some pretty notable failures in spine too. And that could be part
no doubt.
Shyness, but we've seen the same thing in dental. Dental still, it's a bone implant, right? But that market functions totally different than everything else.
Yeah.
And I think you have to go into each one of those segments with a different mindset, whether that's pricing or marketing or whatever the case is. You have to hit them different tactics.
Yeah, totally agree. So I want to talk about the FDA just a little bit. So I know you guys talked about the master file, getting your own product through with your own as the predicate. Like, what was your experience just going through that with a new, novel surface treatment type technology, the FDA master file, and you guys went through it first. So I think you kind of experienced both sides of the coin, right? Like being the first 510K with a new type of surface treatment technology, but also being like the holder of that master file. So like just open the floor to you here. Like what was your experience with that? Like any nuance or lessons learned from going through that?
We definitely adopted the philosophy of 1 degree of separation. So, we developed a line of just plain Jane PEEK and titanium interbodies and got a clearance. And then 2 years later, came back and added OsteoSync to it on the PEEK cages. So then we introduced, hey, here's a molded PEEK cage with OsteoSync, got that clearance. And then 2 years later, came back with a submission to add nanotubes to the forced titanium, which introduced the master file. And we didn't get what we wanted out of the gate, but we took what we could get. And the FDA came back and was like, hey, if you want to add those things, then you need to repeat these tests to show these things. And we still adopt that philosophy. So even on next generation surface, whatever, we adopt this, hey, let's take a device that's either already cleared or whatever. We'll add some tech to it. We may come back and add some label claims. But we kind of have the strategy of it. It's back to the whole, if you're going to do something new, don't do anything too new or too wide because and then it may be hard to reel from that. We do a lot of pre-submissions to kind of get an idea of what's their appetite for certain things. And that's usually helpful, but it is kind of, hey, let's do this. It's kind of, you just keep getting to where we ended up at with, which was a great level.
That's a really good point. The whole kind of stair-step regulatory approach, I highly recommend it. You don't have to eat the whole elephant all at once. And so I think when you're doing funding strategy, right, I think you should always keep that in mind. Specific to, you may have like a new spine platform, right? And like trying to come in with a static and a footprint expanding and a vertical expanding and all of it all at once, right, would be like way too much, right? So I think trying to stair-step what you can, and that's true outside of spine, outside of orthopedics, right? Like try to think about, to a degree, like not even what is a minimally viable product. If you're truly doing something kind of like that, the FDA may really raise an eyebrow. Like think like, okay, what is a de-risking stair step that I can do that then puts me in a really good position to add something small to an existing clearance, right? And then expand those indications. So
yeah. And we're working on some things that we may not be able to do that philosophy, but we will where we can, because it is all about de-risking along the way. So
yeah, well, and I've seen, back in my time in the vascular access space, there was a company called Volano Vascular that kind of took the same approach. Like they got clearance with something that they were never going to commercialize, and then turned right back around and claimed their own device as their predicate and added this one other kind of feature or functionality, and it worked well for them. I think they got acquired by BD, and the rest is history. So it's a strategy that I think when you can execute it well and the technology set and predicates call for it. I'm curious, in the discussion, like during some of the pre-submissions, like how forthright were you with the FDA in terms of like, hey, like this is what we're doing now. We're going to do this later. Are you like, does that seem like a viable path? Or was it a little bit like you basically only let them in on what's up to that current submission and don't talk about anything else after?
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
We've learned to probably be a little more close to the vest with the information than, hey, here's what we're ultimately trying to get to. And I think it depends on what that ultimately trying to get to is.
Yeah.
If we go to our current surface and what we wanted in the label, we played our cards on that, hey, this is what we want to get to. And they came back and said, well, if you want that, we're not going to let you put it in there now, but if you want that, then you got to repeat these tests and include this variable. And then it was a decision for us. Okay, do we want to do that or do we not want to do that? And we felt it important and we did it. So I think you just kind of have to be a little discerning when you're in those conversations on how far do you want to go. But, there's some times where, we've had the conversations about, hey, let's add this to our nanotubes, whatever, because it will increase osseointegration. It'll make it even perform better on osseointegration. But we know inherently that it's also going to decrease bacterial colonization. So it's one of those that's like, okay, we're not going to push that. We're just going to push the osseointegration piece.
Yeah.
And let medical professionals make the judgment on what that material can do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I like to ask this question, especially operators and people leading companies. What keeps you up at night? Is it disruptive other startups? Is it something else entirely? Kind of what keeps you up at night? Acid reflux,
Yeah. At night, I do have a little bit of a fear complex, and it's usually more personal than maybe as a company. So those things sometimes keep me up at night. Like, hey, can we really do what we think we can do? Some of those doubts, I guess you'd say. Which I think at a certain level can be healthy.
I agree.
But I think it's the stuff for me is probably more about, do we got the technical risk right? I have no problems managing execution risk. So, hey, here's the process. It's going to work. It's execution. Those things don't bother me. I've lived in the world for 25 years. Doesn't concern me. You'll figure it out. I mean, things always go awry, but you'll figure it out. The technical risk, knowing, hey, there's a big chunk of our business model, whatever, that's hinging on this piece of technology. Are we going to get all the technical risk, checked off and move forward? Is it really going to work? And, anytime you go into an animal study, it's always oh, here we go. It worked in the lab. They're going to work in the animal study. And then half your animals die for no reason to your device. They fall or whatever.
Yeah.
They're always hard. But I think customers adopt. I mean, that's some of that's technical risk. But we really try to adopt philosophy. We do everything we can to keep this thing headed in the right direction, check off the problems as they come up, solve technical risks as the best you can.
Yep.
And I knowing when, okay, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
We want one thing. And we had that early on in Nanopy. The technology we ended up with was not the technology that we started with. We actually started with a resorbable bioceramic that had some really cool benefits in vertebral fractures, osteoporotic, other bone fractures. And we got to a certain point, we did not get favorable information from CMS on reimbursement. And we went on to the next thing. And I think it's knowing, okay, yeah, we got to pivot. But keep me up at night. It's probably back to managing through the technical risk, because you never know. You're always one test away from that wasn't good. But I also believe, because some people, will go through these things and they won't refrain from doing a certain test or something because they're fearful of a bad result. And my philosophy is, good or bad, you're going to have to know. I'd rather us do it than someone else do it.
Yeah.
If someone else does it and you have no control, then you're defending yourself. So you do it, you at least can pivot before something goes wrong. But
yeah, that's a really good point. And I got to imagine too, when you're doing something that is very chemistry based and it's almost, everything's mechanical to some degree, but there's a lot of it's smaller, it's nano, right? Like there is a little bit more of that gray area unknown of how is this going to perform? Especially what's going to happen when we put it in an animal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we've done studies where you can actually make a nano dimension that bacteria would like to nest in it.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's one of those that's, and we do a lot of cell studies in the lab. We got a 3-person science team at NC State now. They do a lot of cell studies trying to, make sure that we've got this thing right before we start doing animal studies and those things. But you don't always get the results. I mean, I'd say at one time they probably had a dozen different surface type technologies on the table, and they're just going through and checking them off, right? Well, this one, which ones do better in certain areas, and it's refining all the time. But you got to have a pretty big funnel, opening a funnel to get to the one at the bottom. So
yeah, and I also think, before I get to my next question, I just want to say, I think that point about what you ended up kind of having success with long term was not what you started with. And I think that's really important point, the kind of courage to just be able to say like, hey, we need to pivot off of this. But I think there's also another lesson in there of, most companies, I would say it's like almost a certainty that your initial thing and the Gen 1 version of that initial thing is not what's going to make you the most successful. It's not what's going to get acquired. It's like some iteration or Gen 2 or Gen 3 that you've learned and refined after kind of getting it in the field and getting it used, or getting, more data, better data. Like that's ultimately what gets acquired. That's ultimately what is going to drive success. It's just rare that someone's like, yeah, we made it and here's the Gen 1 and we ride this thing to the moon and we get it acquired. It's just so rare. But I want to kind of back to the acquisition of the technology assets with Medtronic. What are one or two keystone tactics or strategies during the entire M&A process, and I'm including courtship here, that you think drove it to a successful outcome?
I think there was a big portion focused on the technology piece, right? That's what kind of got them in the door. But at the end of the day, it's about being comfortable and working on the long-term strategy relationship. And especially looking back now, even from day one and that whole courtship and everything, there was a pretty strong focus on just building a relationship. And people, BD people changed. We had quite a few different paces throughout that process. The core team was pretty consistent throughout, but I can recall a phone call and a fairly large meeting with higher level leadership at Medtronic where the sole focus was, I just want to know who I'm in business with.
Yeah.
And I think back to the Nanomy name, we talked about the power of small bonds and those things. That was in this as well, because it is about building a relationship. We're working through this together. We were co-designing this stuff, and there was things are going to come up. And I think every time there was this focus of, it came up, let's just get it fixed and move on. That was in that relationship from the beginning, whether it was discussing terms, whatever, it always came back to, hey, we both have to win in this, and just be honest. We both have to make money, and there's no need to hide behind that or anything else. Just be transparent about it. And it was, there was parts of that was grueling, but I do think the whole focusing on the relationship primarily and not just the transaction helps in all of that. And that's how I'm wired naturally. My dad owned his own business, and I probably learned more of that from him than what I ever thought I did looking back. But it's not about just, he was an ag implement dealer, so he sold ag implements. It wasn't about just selling this tractor to this guy this time. It's, hey, I want to sell it to him this time, and the next time, the next time, and the next time. And that's a relationship focus. And I think we've done that with Medtronic from the beginning. I think we do that with any of our potential customers or current customers. It is about, how do we help you be successful in this? Because if we can help you be successful, ultimately we'll be successful.
Yeah.
We take it on the chin doing that in the early days, probably a little bit, but got to be sustainable.
Well, no, that's such a good point. It's such a misnomer that is transactional. It's the opposite. Like, it's not transactional. It has to be a partnership. It has to be based around relationship and trust. And like, for it to be, that de-risks it, but also then for it to even be successful, you have to have, like, it's not like people think you do these transactions and they cut you a big check and you walk away and just like wave at them as they have success. Like, it is, in any transaction, there is like a extended period of time where you're working together to try to make this thing successful. And I think a lot of people forget about that. I was just talking the other day to someone in corporate BD, not in spine, but in the device world. And they were talking about how you have to want to work with these people. You have to like them. You have to trust them and have a good relationship, or like nothing's going to get done. No one's going to want to do anything with them, because like, it's like the beer test. You know what I mean? Like, do I want to just like, do I want to see this person win? Do I want to see, are they someone I want to work with? So like, I think that's a lesson for anybody listening. It's all about relationships.
I've had that litmus test for a long time. And prior to this role, I was CFO for, like I said, 25 years. And I had a rule that if I can't eat a meal with them, then I'm not sure I want to do business with them. And that was as much on the service side, like people providing me services, same thing. I don't care if I'm buying from them or selling to them. It's kind of that same idea. And in this industry, it's too small.
Yeah, right? So small.
You can't mess this stuff up, because you're probably going to run into these people again somewhere if you're sticking around the industry.
No doubt. So beyond orthopedics, or I guess beyond spine, right? What medical specialties and verticals, right, do you see as the most promising for Nanovis, Surface Technologies, and kind of where are those verticals fall priority-wise on the roadmap for you guys?
Yeah, I think foot and ankle is our next high priority. Because we see two things. One, there's a series of procedures in the foot and ankle that they're just tough cases, whether that's Charcot foot or some fusion procedures. The other side of that is not only are they tough procedures, they're rapid escalation. So a failed implant leads to amputation fairly quickly.
Yeah.
We do believe that that's prevalent in the foot and ankle space. And we think that that's probably the next big segment that would benefit from our technology. Outside of that, it's probably any place there's a cementless indication. So cementless patellas, cementless tibias, those types of things. And we are limited to titanium, so we're going to have some limitations on that. We are working on technology that'll be coming to fruition coming months, that will be any implantable alloy that will open up more doors, maybe more applicable to trauma market and some of those some of those areas where cost is more of an issue. So I think those are the two biggies. We think there's a great application for the dental market and abutments. So we know that our nanotubes at one size does really good at osseointegration. We know at a smaller size nanotube, it does really good at tissue attachment. So you start thinking about dental implants where I've got to have osseointegration on the implant, good tissue attachment on the abutment. Same way with an amputation and an abutment on amputation. I need a good osseointegration on a piece of it. I need good tissue attachment on a piece of it. We think our technology is great because we've seen in animal studies, I mean, we've had induced infection models where we still get positive tissue attachment. So awesome. We have some data coming out here soon, I hope, that's going to tell that story very well, and are looking forward to it. But I think those are, if I take the next three, those are the biggies.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I've got two more questions before we wrap. We'll try to go through these quick. I know we're getting close to time here. I feel like the full story with NanoV is like really fascinating. You know, there's kind of more ducks and turns and dives and different things. It involves licensed technology. I think there was some grant funding in there as well, or economic development type funding. But like, if you could just go through kind of the different like staples in the story, if you will, right? Like licensed technology, grant funding, kind of the venture funding side, where there are other big things that were leveraged that are either on the beaten path or off the beaten path for most venture-backed companies.
Yeah, the big rocks, it was a licensed technology. We did get a large grant from the state of Indiana Economic Development Commission, the 21st Century Tech Fund, which was very helpful in the early days, non-dilutive. And, so we went through that. And then like the commercial product space, we said we never want to be a products company. I do think we got a little bit confused with that, but that product is what led to a Medtronic transaction. So it wasn't a bad decision.
Yeah.
And I think the next big rock was really focused. So once Medtronic started, once that courtship and transaction process started, really coming down to, okay, what is the focus of NanoV now and what's it going to be? And that led to the mission of, hey, we're just going to focus on surfaces because we think surfaces make a difference. And those are the big ones. We've had some great alignment with some relationships in there from manufacturing. The founder of NanoV, it's no secret, the founder of NanoV he's the sole owner of Micropulse, large contract manufacturer, full gamut of services. That was huge for NanoV. We're still sitting in Micropulse's building today. I mean, that's where I'm at because incubate this and get it going. And that relationship has been key to our success because we get access to things that most companies our size would not have access to. They really helped with the manufacturing piece and all of that. But yeah, outside of that, I can't say that there was, we did hire an investment bank in 2015. Wish we'd have done that a little earlier. I think would have saved us from probably some mistakes a few years ahead of that on the cap raise side. So that was positive. Blackpoint was committed capital, announced Blackpoint Capital. And they were good on, getting us some probably structured funding during that time period where we were inventing those products and getting them in the market. Took a lot of cash to do that.
Yeah.
Paging with them was another rock. I wish we would have done it earlier, but hey.
Well, I think this is just like amazing because it kind of has it all, right? There's licensed IP, there's new IP that you guys developed, there's grant funding, there's strategic partnership with a manufacturer, right? There's private funding, there's an investment banker, there's like an acquisition, but it's a little bit unique. It's a sale of assets. So it's like, I think it's just a great example of like, there are a lot of levers to pull and you should try to leverage as many as you can, right? To achieve success. Last question, try to go through this fast and then I'll give you the floor to kind of close us out, plug anything you want to. If we're having this conversation again in 5 years, and I probably still won't have a beard because I can't grow a beard, maybe I'll have less hair, but if we're having this conversation again in 5 years, what will have needed to happen for you to consider NanoV a continued success? Like, where do you see you guys in 5 years?
Yeah, I think 5 years, we're going to see a lot more adoption both in and outside of spine. On our base technology, you're also going to see at least one, if not two new technologies hitting the market for different indications of use. And I think from lessons we learned on the first technology, the next two will go faster, both through development and market adoption. We learned the lessons and we're adopting those. And I think, NanoV 5 years out, I think it's going to be a household name on if I have a problem with an implant and not integrating brain wall to body. I want to go to Nanovis to figure it out.
That's awesome.
So that's the mission we're on. And I think we're on a great path to get there within the next 5.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last little bit here, take 20, 30 seconds, plug anything you want to. We'll have how to get in contact, your LinkedIn, Nanovis website, all of that in the show notes if anybody wants to get in contact or learn more. But floor is yours. If you want to plug anything, provide any updates, give any shout outs, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Nanovis, just going back over the years, and I look at the team, we've been able to grow and adopt to this technology. I think we're in the best spot, the best position to help OEMs be successful and differentiate implants with a surface. And, I think what you've seen so far is just the beginning. What you're going to see come out of Nanovis. I think we're going to continue to push the envelope on these OEMs to realize that they can make their implants work better with a surface answer, and Nanovis is going to have a catalog to do that.
That's awesome.
And at the end of the day, it is about the patient, and you have to improve healing. You can have a better mousetrap, but if you're not improving healing or improving outcomes, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, if you're not impacting patients, none of it matters, right? None of it matters. So, well, Brian More, CEO of Nanovis, this was an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time, and we'll get you back here in 5 years or so, maybe sooner than that, when we're announcing the next acquisition or big deal. But thank you for your time, Brian, and then thank you for everybody that tuned in and stuck with us through this whole episode. Have a great day.
Hey, thank you.